Hey everybody, it's Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by Uber Eats. Get game day deals all season long. It's me, your man, MG Marcus Grant, joined by Michael F. Florio and Laquan Jones. We're still eating Thanksgiving leftovers. Hopefully, oh, you're not?
No.
Nope.
No. Yesterday was the last day, Marcus.
Last night.
I still have a little bit of ham left. I mix it in with my eggs. It's great. Anyway, we got some big takeaways from Week 13. Still one game left to go. We got the Browns at the Broncos on Monday Night Football, but a full slate ahead of that we can dive into. Plus, we'll have some waiver wire picks as well. And we got to do our weekly Jonnu Smith update because that's a thing now that we have to do on this show. But as always, depends on your perspective. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway. Let's get started as we always do with some fantasy headlines and one really frustrating and unfortunate one to begin with. Christian McCaffrey, who we waited for weeks to finally come back. We got to see him for a few games, and now it looks like it is over. On Sunday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills, McCaffrey left early with a knee injury that is being called possibly season-ending. So I guess the first thing, Florio, the easy thing is, next man up, obviously, Jordan Mason is the easy call. How much interest do you have, though, in Isaac Guerendo going forward?
I definitely want him on my roster because a number of reasons. One, this is the last week of buys, so your bench spots become a little bit more where you could roll it, like take upside shots rather than needing players for like bye week replacements or stuff like that. But also, Jordan Mason, for as great as he was, did hit a bit of a wall down the stretches with his tenure as a starter. And then Isaac Guerendo has the juice, man, and he's capable of putting out some really big plays. So while I think Mason will be the lead guy and will get the most of the opportunities, I could see Guerendo either one, carving out his own standalone role, or maybe two, if Mason continues to struggle a little bit like he did prior to CMC coming back, maybe we see him start to it look more like a split or something like that. So definitely someone I want on my rosters right now.
I also think, Laquan, this is sort of the lesson of this part of the season, starting to go out and get your handcuffs. Get those guys that, if something happens to the guy ahead of them, it's important to have these guys because you just never know. Suddenly somebody walks into a big workload, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Florio hit a nail on the head. Isaac Guerendo definitely pops up on my radar as a guy that I want, just to have a high-end handcuff as well, because Jordan Mason, he definitely did hit a wall. He definitely hit the point where we're starting to see him kind of break down and he suffered some injuries, and Isaac Guerendo plug and play into that system. Of course, he was able to show up and show out. So I definitely want, one of these guys on my rosters going up, into the playoffs, because at the end of the day, that waiver wire, the streets is going to be looking nasty once, people start hitting this week for the wire.
Absolutely. We're going to dive into waiver wire a little bit later, but it is going to be a tough week because, in case you have not heard, it's Buymageddon Part 2. You might be fighting in your league. Good luck, because there are 6 teams on a bye, including a lot of really good offenses with some really good players that are not going to be available to you.
We got to think of a tagline like Buymageddon 2. Like, what would the movie line be?
Like, I don't know.
Buy, strike back or something like that.
Yeah, it's got to be. We'll workshop that, and we'll try to get it for Wednesday's show or something. I don't know. Real quick for you guys, obviously, McCaffrey, we don't know how long exactly he's going to be out. Certainly the end of this season. We'll see how long it potentially stretches in the next season. I know there was concern about drafting him at the top of drafts this year. You're way too early ADP, Florio, on Christian McCaffrey for 2025.
Depending on when he is back, I think he will go somewhere. If he's back for the start of the season next year, I think he's a second-round pick. If he is not, I think he'll go somewhere in the 3rd or 4th round. I think his days of being the 101 are long over. I think his days of potentially being a first-round pick are over because this is another injury. There's still the Achilles injuries. It's also funny to me that in his career, CMC has 2 seasons where if you did not have him, you probably didn't win a championship. And then 2 seasons where if you took him first overall, your season was long over from the moment that you took him.
I fall into that latter category where I drafted him and, But those teams aren't going anywhere because I miss McCaffrey for so much of the season. Yeah, it's been frustrating. Speaking of major injuries, Taysom Hill suffered a torn ACL plus additional damage. That is per our own Ian Rappaport, and he is done for the rest of the season. I mean, Laquan, look, I get it. He has sort of been a thorn in our side for fantasy, but the last couple of weeks, we knew we could count on him, right? I mean, there was no Chris Olave is gone. Rashid Shaheed is gone. Aside from Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill is kind of the only other thing in this offense. So now, without Taysom Hill, anybody we can count on besides Alvin Kamara in New Orleans?
I'm going to have to go with MVS. I mean, Marquise Valdez-Scantling. I mean, it sounds nasty, but he's making the big plays. He's plug and play into that role, for Rashid Shaheed to stretch the field. But you might see him be utilized more as a all-around wide receiver, intermediate, maybe short targets as well. But Derek Carr is going to have to figure it out with the rest of the company. I mean, honestly, I think this is more work on Alvin Kamara's workload. So, fantasy managers that have Alvin Kamara going into the playoffs, I know they're happy about that, being that, he'll get most of the touches on the goal line, et cetera, and receiving work. So most likely MVS, he becomes more interesting as the weeks go on. I mean, honestly, the touchdown he had yesterday, honestly, it's frustrating as a Rams fan to see it, but I kind of expected it, it's one of those things that it's coming, and then it happens. It's like, all right, we got one out of the way. Let's just get this dub and get the game over with. But MVS for the next couple of weeks is definitely interesting.
I heard the annoyance in your voice, though, when you started that answer, just this big sigh, and you're like, I guess it's MVS. Because, I feel like that's kind of the only way to respond to that, right? I mean, we sort of know who Marquez Valdez-Scantling is. I know the point has been made on social media. It's funny that a guy who has played his career with Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and somehow it's Derek Carr that unlocks him. I can't figure it out. It doesn't make any sense.
Look, he gets to make the big plays next week as well. We got the Giants, and they allow a ton of big plays downfield in that secondary. Yep. So go get them.
Peek behind the curtain. MVS is a start for me and start sitting.
Oh, man.
Crazy.
Let's go.
You know what? I haven't even gone through my whole. He might end up being a sleeper, too, as well. Who knows? We'll see how this goes.
Let's go.
For sure. All right.
The three of us, company men, look at our shirts. MVS.
Yep, there it is. MVS. There it is. All right. Let's move on. Look back at what we saw over the weekend. It is time now for Fantasy Heroes presented by Subway. These are the top scorers heading into Monday Night Football. Josh Allen had himself a day. He had 2 passing touchdowns, 1 to himself. So he had the receiving touchdown. He had a rushing touchdown as well. Look, he's very much. I think he might have taken the lead for the MVP after what we saw last night. Certainly, very much in that conversation for sure. 28.4 fantasy points. Bucky Irving, huge day. I think a lot of us sort of expected that. He had 27.5 points, a rushing touchdown, 152 yards on the ground as well. Terry McLaurin had himself a nice day, a lot of it coming in the first half. 8 for 73 and a pair of touchdowns there. That's 27 points. Brock Bowers continuing to eat regardless who the quarterback is in Las Vegas. 10 for $140 and a touchdown. 30 points for Brock Bowers. 3 different kickers, Chris Boswell, Chris Ryland, and Chase McLaughlin. 16 fantasy points there. And the Chargers defense, a sack, 4 interceptions, and a touchdown. 13 points allowed. They scored 19 fantasy points. The Chargers beating the Falcons despite gaining fewer yards and not having an offensive touchdown, but through the generosity of Kirk Cousins, able to get a win. Apparently, falconing is greater than chargering. So those are the guys who had some big weeks for you. Individually, though, your fantasy hero for the week was Laquan.
Wow. Joe Mixon. I mean, look, he literally fits the criteria of a fantasy hero. Like, he put his cape on because, it was bad in the first half. He had 3 fantasy points. It's like your favorite TV show, anime, or whatever, where the hero, the protagonist, is getting beat up, getting destroyed. There's no return of, any sight. And then in the second half, Joe Mixon put up 18 fantasy points and cleaned up nice. And that is the hero way. You come and save the day when things are just terrible and bad, because I was pulling my hair out. I'm like, yo, this is the layup matchup. What are you doing, Joe? Can we get it going? And then cleaning up with a whopping 21 fantasy points, another RB1 week for Joe Mixon. What an amazing season he's having right now, guys.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us looked at that score, especially in the second half. You're like, what exactly is happening? Like, what are the Texans doing? And then finally, as you mentioned, Joe Mixon sort of took control over that one.
I will want
Florio,
to point
CJ
out.
Stroud certainly didn't.
Yeah.
No.
Ugh.
But I
That's
want
a
to point
different
out,
conversation.
hopefully he remains a hero, because after this bye, he comes back against Miami, the Chiefs, and Baltimore. They're top 10 rushing defenses. So the playoffs might look nasty for Joe Mixon.
Yeah, not a good schedule the rest of the way for Joe Mixon for sure. Florio, your fantasy hero, rather.
The most underrated top 4 wide receiver season that I can remember. Like, Terry McLaurin is not getting nearly enough credit for how well he is playing right now. The only wide receivers with more fantasy points this season: Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson. All 3 of those were top 5 picks in fantasy football. Meanwhile, Terry McLaurin was going outside the top 5 rounds in a lot of drafts, and you were getting similar type production. He has tied a career high with 9 touchdowns, set a new career high. I mean, not only is that a career high for him, it is the most touchdowns a Commanders receiver has had since Santana Moss in 2005.
Whoa.
He played 80 games without Jaden Daniels in his career, had 2 multi-touchdown games. In 13 with Jaden Daniels, he's done so 3 times already. Like, he won me a couple of matchups, him and Jaden, that stack. But yeah, Terry McLaurin, I think we need to give this guy some more flowers, because I feel like his season is just going completely under the radar.
I think it kind of is, because Jaden Daniels has sort of stolen all the headlines, but he's very much having a good season. I was joking yesterday that Cliff Kingsbury is going to use that first half and send it as his application to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears, because the first half was great. Second half, meh. First half looked great against the Titans.
Start off strong and fall off.
Yeah, it's wild. My fantasy hero for the week was Russell Wilson. 414 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, nearly 27 fantasy points for Russ. And part of it was because he finally took advantage of a positive matchup. We had been promoting him as a guy to start for the last couple of weeks. Let us down against Baltimore with just 6 points there. We thought maybe at Cleveland he could give you something decent, but the whole blizzard thing happened, and he just got fewer than 14 points, but really came out against Cincinnati. And the Bengals defense sort of showed everybody that they are as bad as we've been saying they are, but took advantage of that in a big way. And shout out to Russell Wilson, because everybody was sort of down on him. Everybody was wondering whether or not he was officially washed. People were upset at Mike Tomlin for making the change from Justin Fields. And all Russ has done is gone out there and win football games. And I know it hasn't always been great on the fantasy side of things, but he's been very effective. He has helped this offense for sure. We know George Pickens has been very productive, but Calvin Austin, even Pat Freiermuth jumping in. So that has been really great to see. All right, let's go over kind of a 30,000-foot view of this thing. What are our biggest takeaways from Week 13? Laquan, start us off.
Man, my biggest takeaways is that Bryce Young looks so good, man. Like, it's like to the point where he's not getting enough love on the fantasy streets of the timelines, because we're looking at Bryce Young in a situation where you have Jalen Coker, who is injured. We have Jatavion Sanders going out with injury, and it's like he's doing all these amazing things, sitting in the pocket, cool, calm, and collected, and going out there and making the big plays for this Panthers offense. He's looked amazing since he became the starter, and honestly, we mentioned CJ Stroud earlier in the show. He's actually averaging more fantasy points per game than CJ Stroud coming back as the starter. So I don't know why he's on the wire. He might be a little bit more usable in your starting lineups than CJ Stroud, which is crazy that he's doing this with this exact offense that he started off in the season with, where we were just down on Bryce Young, but he's not getting enough credit of his decision-making, running out of the pocket. These highlights are amazing, guys. Like, Bryce Young is that dude, and he needs to be picked up off the waivers, I honestly think.
No, I'm down with it. I'm going to pat myself on the back here, because he was in the sleepers column this week. Had been playing well. The numbers hadn't translated, but he was playing some good defenses, had a great matchup, totally took advantage of it. Florio, you learned something about another quarterback in the NFC South. This one maybe not so good.
Yeah, Bryce Young should have won that game 2 different times yesterday, by the way. The Panthers defense didn't. Yeah, Kirk Cousins is absolutely toast. And he gets a revenge game next week against the Minnesota Vikings. That should be a lot of fun. I am 0% excited for it, because I watched Kirk Cousins play football these last few games. 0 touchdowns in his last 3 games, 6 interceptions. 4 interceptions yesterday. And I promise you, if you watch the game or go back and watch the tape, it is so much worse than you were probably envisioning. His pocket movement is awful. He has no velocity whatsoever on any of his throws. This interception right here is a benchable offense, I think. I was watching that play and I was speechless. I was like, what is he doing? It's because he has no mobility. He can't plant and throw. The velocity is gone. I think it is time for a move to happen there because he's dragging down Drake London and Darnell Mooney and everything. And I know they gave him a lot of money, but if you took the contract aside and just watched him play, him and Aaron Rodgers are the handshake. They tore their Achilles and their career is done. They're not the same players anymore. They just simply are not.
I mean, the Michael Penix conversation is very real about whether or not he should get a starting opportunity here, especially with the Falcons still, with a shot at the playoffs, shot at winning the division, but right now Kirk Cousins not helping it. I will sort of piggyback on that and just say at this point, it's just time for us to admit it. Yep. Kyle Pitts is mid. He's just mid, and that's okay, right? Like that is fine. I had to pack up my cape yesterday, put it away. It's just time to admit that this is not the guy that we thought was going to be the generational guy. He played 40% of the snaps. After the game, you have coaches talking about, we got to figure out how to get him involved. Raheem Morris is like, we're gonna figure some things out. We got to get him more involved, whatever. I'm like, it's year 4. We haven't figured out how to get him involved at this point. We've gone through a coaching change, quarterback change, scheme changes. It just hasn't happened. At this point, it's just time for us to admit that right now he's just a guy, and that's okay. And as long as we start to kind of think about him that way, maybe there's a chance he has an Evan Ingram type, glow up a little bit later in his career. But for now, Kyle Pitts just is. Right. I mean, we're in a situation where Drake London and Darnell Mooney are getting more opportunities. At some point we all got to just sort of, let go of the rope. And I think it's time now to officially let go of the rope with Kyle Pitts. There.
Yeah.
All right.
I question if he's got that dog in him.
Yeah. It doesn't seem
I
that
blame
way.
Jonnu. I'm blaming Jonnu for everything.
We will get to that after the break. Time for get to the waiver wire and stuff as well. Stick around for a little bit more of the NFL Fantasy Football Show. It is time for the waiver wire presented by YouTube TV. Florian, who should we be checking for in week 14?
These quarterbacks might sound like you're going to be questioning me, but there's 6 teams on bye, a lot of big name quarterbacks. So Aiden O'Connell has a good matchup against the Bucks. Will Levis has a good matchup against the Jags. Cooper Rush has a good matchup against the Bengals, all in play as streaming options. Jaylen Warren needs to be picked up right now. So does Chris Rodriguez Jr. Sincere McCormick is getting more and more of the attention there from the Raiders coaches. Blake Corum played season high in at least I think he did yesterday. Zach Charbonnet, Tyler Algier, Antonio Gibson, what we were talking about earlier in the show. The time of the year where you want your handcuffed running backs on your roster. And then some pass catchers, Jerry Jeudy. I've seen enough with him out even playing on Monday night so far. MVS needs to be picked up right now. All Nick Westbrook-Akina does is catch touchdowns. Literally almost half his catches are touchdowns. Adam Thielen is back and looking like himself again as the top target there. Parker Washington had a lot of volume yesterday, and then some tight ends. Pat Freiermuth, who caught a touchdown. Hunter Henry's on bye, but the volume is too good if you need a tight end. Theo Johnson as a streaming option. Noah Gray as a potential streaming option. And then this is like a deeper league ad, but Austin Hooper low-key getting highly involved in the Patriots passing attack.
It's Hooper?
Yeah, it's funny because I keep trying to put Austin Hooper in the sleepers column, and I just don't have the guts to do it. But then he goes out and he catches a touchdown or something. So I'm like, maybe I find the courage at some point in the next few weeks to kind of do that. But look, I want to ask you about Chris Rodriguez because Austin Eckler is on injured reserve after he had a concussion. He's going to be out for at least the next 4 weeks. I know we thought Jeremy McNichols was going to get some run, and look, he did get on the field. But it looks like maybe Chris Rodriguez is next man up in that backfield behind Brian Robinson.
Yeah, maybe. I do want to see it happening again because Jeremy McNichols is also a talented back in that backfield. But honestly, just credit to this Commanders rushing offense, honestly. I mean, look, you get a guy like Chris Rodriguez off the practice squad and get him in there and he shows up and shows out because he looked really, really good with his opportunities. So hopefully they keep him in there in the rotation, with Brian Robinson. And honestly, this Titans defense, it looked like, they weren't the defense that we known and love against the run. They're usually tough against the run. They're one of those defenses that like to put their, ears back and get and clog the middle of the field, but they were just getting ran all over with Chris Rodriguez. So he's definitely worth a pickup.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were kind of thinking to pivot to Jeremy McNichols. Maybe that's not done yet. The tough part about that is the Commanders are on a bye this week, so we're gonna have to wait a couple weeks to sort of see exactly how this is going to shake out. Hold your breath. You're gonna have to kind of white knuckle it through the playoffs to figure out this Washington backfield. Speaking of white knuckling things, it's time for a Jonnu Smith update. We need like a sounder. We need like a sounder or some kind of graphic, like I don't know, play the Miami Vice theme or something like that. Anyway, week 13, Jonnu continues his ridiculous run, his run of 20-point games over the last 4 weeks. You know how many tight ends have more fantasy points than Jonnu Smith? None at all. Jonnu Smith is the tight end one over the last 4 weeks. He has 21 plus points in 3 straight games. This past week, 10 catches for 113 yards on Thanksgiving night against the Green Bay Packers. At the moment, he is currently the tight end 5 overall. Have you started looking at the strawberry blonde, platinum blonde? Have you started thinking of what kind of colors you want?
You guys really want this to happen? And then the people in the comments are like DMing me like, yo, you should do this look.
Me.
Like people keep photoshopping me of like different hair colors of blonde, light blonde, dark blonde, dirty blonde. Like I'm not doing this. Like Jonnu is not going to be top 5. Like I'm reverting what I said in August.
I like to think that at night, like when you lay down or whatever, like a bottle of hair dye talks to you like the Green Goblin mask talks to Spider-Man in the Spider-Man movies. Like it's just calling your name.
Oh man. Anyway, we will be keeping an eye on Jonnu Smith as we creep closer to the end of the season. But I'm not gonna lie, it's not looking good for you, man.
Are we capping it at the end of week 17? Because that's the end of the fantasy season.
Yeah, we'll give him to week 18. We'll give him through week 18. Okay. Just give him one last chance. We'll try to make it fair.
I swear he listens to this pod. That's why he keeps showing up like this. Like he keeps like blowing up. Like these are numbers he's never done before. What are we doing?
It's not looking good for you, man.
Also, he's only 2 points behind Travis Kelce. Like he could easily get higher than tight end 5.
If he gets into the 4 slot, it might be a wrap for you, man. That's all I'm saying. It might be a wrap if he gets to number 4. Man, for sure. All right. As we get ready to close this show out, it is time for Moments We Love, presented by Barefoot Wine. And remember a couple years ago, Geno Smith had that season. He said, they wrote me off. I didn't write back. Well, he is like Arya Stark, right? He's got the names. He's like Steve Buscemi in Billy Madison. He has the names of people, and he's got the Jets at the top of his list. He posted the photo, the meme, after he beat the Jets. The meme, you know it, I went to one of my biggest haters' funerals just to make sure that he was dead. That is the photo that Geno Smith put up after the win. Laquan, I didn't know he had this much hate in his heart, but it is hilarious.
Man, the amount of hate that Geno has had, before his comeback was just that deep. Like he had all this bottled up. We're seeing Geno basically get his lick back. Like he's basically going out there marking the list. Like, all right, Jets, you're off. And this was the most fire response that anybody could have had of all time. Like Geno, Hall of Famer right there in the memes.
You are a fellow hater, Florio. I mean, you have to endorse this sort of thing.
I was going to say, as a fellow Jet hater, nothing brings me more joy. Not only this post, but like the fact that Geno Smith and Sam Darnold are having success elsewhere and like potentially going to the playoffs and both beat the Jets head to head on the year that they were picked by many to be a Super Bowl team is hilarious to me. Now, all we need is for Zach Wilson to get a spot start and to beat them. And we're golden.
That would be epic, man. There would be a meltdown amongst Jets Nation if somehow Zach Wilson got a win over the Jets. By the way, at this point in last season, the Jets were 4-8. This year, they are 3-9. Just putting that out there. That's all I'm going to say.
Don't worry, Aaron Rodgers says it's not all his fault.
I mean, at some point he's probably going to announce that he's like, I don't know, going to the Department of Government Efficiency or something like that for reasons. Anyway, that's a good point for us to take a pause for now before the black helicopters come for me. That is it. We are done. We appreciate you hanging out with the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by Uber Eats. You know the drill. Tell 2 friends to tell 2 friends. Rate, review, and remember, if you're going to do something you regret tomorrow, be sure to sleep late. Be safe, take care of yourselves, and we will talk to you tomorrow.